Welcome to Sober Dad Crew, the podcast where we talk about all things sobriety, recovery, parenting, music, tattoos, work, and more. For more information, please visit soberdadcrew.com. My guest this episode is men's fashion content creator Parker York Smith. Of course, we talk about sobriety and fatherhood, but we also talk about fashion, the joy of thrifting, and whether or not I should rethink my strong and long-held dislike of loafers. All right, Parker York Smith, welcome to Sober Dad Crew.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm going to kick it off like I always do and ask you how many kids you have.
We have one 2-year-old son, York, and he is awesome.
Yeah, 2 is fun and sort of daunting. 2-year-olds and teenagers, very similar in my experience. Just louder door slamming and more vocabulary when they're older, but it's those like ages of trying to like break out into the world and more autonomy. So it's an interesting age.
For sure. I'd be surprised if he could slam the door any harder than he does now. I mean, it's almost unintentional, but his natural door close is just the hardest slam possible every day.
Yeah, maybe it was my oldest as a teenager when we had hollow core doors at the time. Slam the door just wasn't satisfying for him because it just doesn't. A hollow core door just kind of sucks. It's not like that really quality slam you're looking for in your angry teenage moment. He might have gone back for like another go at it, even just like fuck.
A good 100% oak slam or something. You know?
I want you to know I'm slamming it. And I'm going to slam
full quality door.
Did you always want to be a dad?
No, actually. I was someone who didn't really have any intention of being a dad. I had, a decent relationship with my dad growing up. My parents got divorced when I was 5. So he was around. He was definitely in my life. It was kind of one of those every other weekend kind of scenarios. And he was fine. My mom didn't expect to be able to to get pregnant. And she sort of medically, miraculously did. So he never planned on being a dad either. So it was kind of a tough thing for him. So therefore, I also just kind of had it in my head that it wasn't in the cards for me. And it just wasn't something that I'm an only child. So it's always been just kind of me and my mom and making the best of it. And I kind of just liked the idea of continuing for it to just be me. So I did not intend on it. But then once I met my wife and time passed and I kind of got to be, I think it was about like 32 or 33. I sort of, for the first time in my life, started seeing the dads and the parents with the young kids. And I was like, oh, that looks more palatable than it ever had in the past. And I knew my wife was kind of down if she was kind of deferring to me for a while, but she always was ready to if I was. And I finally was like, okay, I think let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah. And you kind of got to want to do it, right? To your dad. If it's a surprise and it's nothing you ever wanted, it being a dad's work, being a mom's work, to do it well takes a lot of time and effort, and you should be down with it. I mean, there's certainly a lot of folks out there who weren't sure, whatever, and they have a kid and they rise to the occasion. And then there's certainly people who don't 100% rise to the occasion of parenting.
Sure. Yeah, that's a whole separate conversation in terms of, the desire versus, what outside forces either force upon you or say you should be doing, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it just wasn't something that I felt all that drawn toward. I kind of liked the idea of being that sort of chosen uncle to a lot of friends who I could just kind of pop in on. Because, I just was always highly attracted to the idea of being able to do what I wanted to do all the time, which is still something I battle with
It,
regularly to this
it's
day.
attractive. Right
Yeah.
before we hit record, I was saying everybody in my family is off at the amusement park today, and this is just not my jam. So I stayed behind, which gives me an opportunity to undisturbed record this, not at 10 or 11 at night, which is often what happens, and have a little
Sure.
bit of downtime, which is nice from work and life.
Yeah.
But that is not the day to day reality when you have, kids, and mine are old enough. Well, I have 8, 12, 17, and 21. So I've got the range.
Wow.
The younger two technically are my stepkids, but I just think of them as my kids. But, there's
Good for you.
sports, and there's this, and there's the 17-year-old works, and, the 21-year-old, obviously he works and is adult and pretty independent. But even then, he's still, parenting shifts, but you're sort of still a sounding board, even at that age.
Good. I
So,
love that. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I definitely, my dad passed when I was 22. So it was kind of right when we started to get close for me, because he was a drinker as well. So we would bond over wine and just chatting, and finally kind of, he was able to finally see me as a peer and not as this child around that he didn't know what to do with. So having a 21-year-old sounding board, or being a sounding board for a 21-year-old, is, I can vouch for the importance of that for sure. Yeah, it's a shame that things happen the way they did for me, because it was so nice to finally be like, oh, this is what having a dad is. This is the, learning about quote unquote manhood and these things, and all that stuff. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's sort of an intense, shift and loss there, right? Just as you're getting close,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, nope, sorry, the universe says. I mean, did that sort of, you alluded to this a little bit, that must have played into your, not being sure about being a dad.
It had to have. I mean, I certainly, in hindsight, feel like it was a protection, coping mechanism or something of the sort. I haven't been fully analyzed regarding it, but I mean, I certainly feel like it was just simpler for me, kind of like I said before, just simpler for me to worry about me and not get wrapped up into potentially letting someone else down, or being, doing a bad job, because I spent a lot of my youth resenting my dad and really priding myself on making decisions that I felt would be like the exact opposite of what he would or should have done, or the type of person that he was. And then now, only in my mid to late 30s, honestly, have I really accepted the fact that, oh, wow, I am so similar to this guy. Like, he was 35 when I was born. I was 35 when my son was born. Just so many of the things that I actually really liked about him, if I'm honest with myself, are a lot of the things that I really like about myself.
Yeah, and it is interesting in that point in your life when you get old enough to see and be willing to see, probably, and admit to the influence that your folks had on you. I mean, for sometimes for good, sometimes for worse, but you're raised by people you can't help but be influenced, and then you look at it and you're like, oh right, I'm doing that for these small human beings too. Like you said, I don't want to mess this up. I mean, for me, it's like the most important thing I do. It's the lens through why I work hard and all those things. It's about
Yeah.
being a dad.
Yeah. I'm kind of inching toward that. Cause a lot of the things that I was pretty excited about with having our son was just that I heard so many people talking about how it was so nice to finally have someone they cared about more than themselves, or, finally have this guiding principle to why everything else made sense, because they wanted to do it for their kid. And if I'm honest, I haven't really gotten there yet. It's still pretty personal for me. You know, a lot of what I do is still pretty ego driven. It is still pretty because I want to succeed and be impressive and this and that, you know, yada yada. But I can feel it creeping in with the dad stuff being the reason why, or, you know, that becoming the most important thing to me. Being able to be in a position where I'm lucky enough to be working from home and spending a whole lot of time with my son. On those days where I wish I were off doing, you know, content or whatever it is that I would prefer to be doing, it's definitely harder to remember that sometimes.
And I don't think they're mutually exclusive, right? I think part of the key is figuring out the balance, right? You know, and while I say sort of everything I do filters through that, I also, you know, work hard and I want to be respected for what I do sort of outside of parenting. So I think there is sort of both exist, right? I mean,
Yeah.
me caring about being respected at work and doing a good job at work also helps support, like, so I don't get fired. You know, supports all those things, and having a life outside of your kids too. It is sort of a tricky balance of, right, it's sort of all about your kids, but it still has to be about you in that, and
Yeah,
finding that balance of not losing yourself in the process.
totally. And that's something that my wife and I talk about a lot because it's a lot more natural for her to lose herself. For me, I'm like, I have to fight not to whatever the opposite of that is, to, you know, completely let myself envelop myself. Um, I definitely do not struggle with losing myself and what I want to be doing. I feel like I have a pretty healthy balance with that. And I love that my wife is so good at kind of reining me in terms of, hey, you've spent 5 hours doing what you want to do, you know, let's maybe look at it through the lens of that's great. You can feel accomplished now, and switch your brain into let's be creative toward a fun activity you can be doing with your son, not, you know, worrying about how to fill even more time for yourself today. Because I could very easily just duck my head and forget everyone else is around and do what I want to do. And then when I deem that I am complete or whatever, some hypothetical thing, then I can come out of the shadows and be available. But then even when I do have those days, it's like I end up, you know, being totally wiped and unable to really be present with my son. And I can feel it. He's, you know, as a 2-year-old, they're very intuitive already and everything. So it's a wild ride. I don't know, man. I like how sort of introspective and philosophical this conversation's going. So it's just,
Yeah.
you know,
it,
it's just never expected. It was never expected to be like that.
yeah, I think that you just never know what it's going to throw at you, you know. And as they get older, I mean, you know, and like heavy stuff, like my oldest, he had a friend die by suicide, right? Like I
Mm.
I never thought I was going to have to sit a kid down at the kitchen table and tell him a friend died. Like
Yeah,
I know it's a thing. Like I had a friend when I was 12 who died, but I don't
sure.
think you go into parenting thinking, boy, I'm going to have some heavy conversations with my kid, or trying to explain a
Yeah.
school shooting to your kid, like for the
Oh,
whatever thousandth time.
yeah.
You know, like you just don't know what it's going to throw at you. And that's like the dark stuff, but you also don't know what's going to throw at you, like those moments of just hilarity,
Oh,
you
yeah, for
know, where
sure.
you're just like, wow, this is like bananas. And we're just all just laughing
Yeah.
so much at something. I don't even know, like a kid farted, or, you know, like who even knows what it is, but it's just all of a sudden you're all laughing, or I don't know, you're all out kayaking, or you're just doing something and you're just like, wow, this is kind of like that infinite feeling of love
Yeah. And I'm guilty of kind of projecting myself to a place of some mysterious age where we'll be able to do kayaking or whatever it is, whatever, plug in activity where it's like, as soon as he's autonomous enough to be able to do that, and we can really bond, like I can totally put myself in my dad's shoes where he didn't feel that connected to me because he was like, I don't do anything this kid does. I don't know what he's about. Like I don't remember when I was 6. So like, it's interesting. I have to really draw myself back from not just being like, well, when he's older, it'll be fantastic. When he's, and cause I mean, I'm already feeling it from time to time, even with the 2-year-old, it definitely, when it's good, the highs are the highest highs I've ever had. And the lows are some of the lowest lows I've ever had, the most difficult times for sure. And I'm curious, when you were talking about having the difficult conversations with your son, an interesting thought popped in my head where part of me almost relishes that idea, where it's like, I get excited about, like, I don't know what your relationship with your dad was like, but I get excited about being able to be there for him at those times because I had a friend kill himself. I had friends, die from cancer. I had friends get shot and kill. Like I've had that. I've had a bunch of shitty stuff happen when I was a kid, and there really wasn't anyone there to like, there was a shoulder to cry on, and my mom, like if I wanted to talk about it, I could, but there really wasn't like a male figure there to be like, look, you expressing how you're feeling right now, you talking about this is so fucking masculine. It's so great. As opposed, for me, it was kind of just like, let me hold it in. Like,
That
I don't
goes
want anyone to
well,
know.
right?
Yeah, I know.
It won't blow up later.
So I'm just curious. I'm curious if any part of you kind of, I hesitate to say enjoy because that feels perverse, but you understand what I'm saying, I think.
I mean, I think the word I use is just an honor,
Yeah.
to be, it's an honor to be trusted with anyone's heart.
Yeah.
And I think it starts when they're little, right? You don't, when they're 16 or like, well, now we're going to have a good, deep, strong, trusting relationship.
Sure.
That shit's not real. Like it starts when they're little. And I've sort of been reminded of this in becoming a step parent and like meeting these human beings who are fully formed and having to build this relationship and build this trust with, two people who in a way should look at me with total distrust. Like who are you?
Yeah.
Coming into my life. And so as those relationships have grown, it has reminded me what an honor it is to be trusted. We're also a crazy open house. Like,
Love it.
when the other night, was a whole conversation. We're in our bed, and the 12-year-old came in, and then the 17-year-old came in. It was a whole conversation about periods and tampons. I was like, all right, I'm here. Cool. I'm rolling with this. It's all good because this is like what it should be. We're just having these conversations, and it's totally open, and really nothing's off the table.
Great.
And that just shows, that's like the building the trust thing that, and me as a dude not being like, ooh, this isn't my subject matter, I'm out of here. It's just like, no, we're a family and we talk about shit.
Yeah.
And I think, some of that connects a little bit to my mom, who always, when we were kids, said, you never go to bed mad. If something comes up, we're dealing with it, and we have to deal with it until 2 a.m. to get everybody in a right place. Like that's what we're going to do. And I think that was such a valuable like lesson in love and respect of the family and everybody's piece in it, right? Because everyone's wired a little different, and everybody's going to like come to their place of circling back to not being mad like each of my kids, if they get upset, has a different process to sort of work through that. And you have to kind of honor the person in the process, which I'm not always good at. I'm always the one who's like, let's talk now, let's talk now, let's talk now.
Yeah.
And some of them need to be like, nah, I got to step away. I'm pissed. Like, I'm going to come back, but I got to cool down. And so like for me, I always have to work on letting people have their own process, because if I'm like, let's talk now, it's really all about me.
Preach.
Right.
I'm the same way.
It's not about them.
Yeah.
And
that's a good way to think about it.
And then it's all like my people pleaser crap too, like comes into play with that, which I have to work on.
Yeah. Totally.
Can we
totally
pivot
relatable.
a little?
Please. Yeah.
A little and talk about, sort of your sobriety journey.
Totally. I'm very open with it, but it's not something that I've necessarily told, as a story. So, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, originally. That's where I grew up, and pretty quintessential, up like sort of middle, I'd say upper half of middle class upbringing. A lot of, I'm from I think it would technically be German Catholic, schools and families. I was the only Catholic in my family. Because the school that I went to, I got baptized. That's a whole separate story. Anyway, started drinking like when I was about 16, and I was the last one in my friend group because I was an athlete. So I was very stern, like, not going to do it, not going to do it. And then finally just gave in one time because I think I was just sick of driving my drunk friends around for a while, honestly. And I was like, someone else needs to do this. If it takes me drinking, I will do it. And I drank, and it was kind of that, how I've heard described as like, oh, this is a feeling that's available. Like, I didn't realize my mind could turn off completely. This is fantastic. So, from 16, it started to become, every weekend kind of thing, all through the rest of high school. Then into college, it developed more into like a freshman year was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe a few on Sunday morning and afternoon. And then sophomore year was Wednesday. Then junior year was Tuesday. And then by senior year, it was almost every night, at least having some drinks. And it just sort of, in hindsight, became super wrapped up into my concept of fun. If there was any expectation of quote unquote fun to be had, then alcohol had to be involved. Definitely. After college, I went to Dayton in Ohio for college. After I graduated in 2009, I moved to Los Angeles and got a serving job. And from there, it was like, going out after work 4 or 5 nights a week till 2 a.m. because it was all these new people. I was making new friends. I was working literally right on the beach, just continually drinking more and more. And then after that job, I got a job in Hollywood at this sort of really, quintessentially Sunset Strip, cool, ultra hip restaurant that the chef was whatever you would call the equivalent to a wine sommelier, but for tequila. I don't know what the term is. He was very well versed in all things tequila, which led me down a path of, it was the type of place where they wanted us to always taste what we were selling. So I would come in for my shift at 4:00, and there'd be, a couple shots or a couple half shots lined up for tasters from some new product that had come in that day that they wanted us to push. So I'm taking a couple shots at 4:00. I'm taking more shots as the night goes on, as I start to get tired. And that's what really did me in, was the tequila. Because I had always just kind of been a beer, maybe like a Jack and Diet or something like that. But then when I found tequila, it started to become like, okay, I'm definitely drinking too much. And from there, I sort of tried all the different things under the sun with my wife to limit my drinking. She was very, you know, her dad is a long time alcoholic, or he was sober for 35 years before he passed. Um, so we did the only drinking on weekends, or only drinking when uh, not buying any alcohol. And then, being a content creator, it would be those times when I wasn't buying alcohol, it would miraculously 3 different liquor companies would reach out to want to send me a bottle. So I just couldn't beat it on my own. And finally I got to a place where I was just, we were at a family party out here on a Sunday afternoon, and I blacked out drinking vodka and jalapeno. And it was not a blackout type of party. And it ruined my whole Monday. I wasn't able to have a functional day. And then it was kind of that was February or March of 2020, like right as lockdown was occurring. So I, had a lot of shame for the next few months. And then finally, June 25th, I had dumped out all the liquor. I did the physical act of dumping it down the drain, everything we had in the house. And then June 23rd, I got caught by my wife drinking some nasty, dusty liqueur we had in the back of our pantry.
Missed that one.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, okay, like, this is deeper than we've ever been with this. Like, let's have a real conversation. And I was like, you're right. I gotta be done. And then, so yeah, it was June 25th, 2020 was my last drink. And it honestly was wonderful, because it was, depressing times, obviously difficult times, but simultaneously the easiest time for me to take full control over, as long as I didn't buy it. And as long as I said no to the emails when these brands were reaching out wanting to send me something, then I could do it. And I'm here. She made me I'm showing him a 3-month chip that she made for me. I never did any meetings or anything like that. It just never happened. I'm not against the program by any means. I just never sought it out.
I didn't either. So,
great. Okay.
I think like whatever works for somebody, that's what you should do.
Yeah, totally. I'm making this such a long story. Sorry, it's not really a conversation.
No, it's all
good. And so yeah, it was great. Being able to not have the option to go and do it. We weren't going to any work events where there'd be cocktails. We weren't going to friends' houses where there'd be drink expectations. So I got really like the first year under my belt before we were even doing anything socially. Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a funny time, because I think there are folks like you who just, all right, time to stop. And then I'm in New York. Liquor stores were an essential business. Restaurants were doing takeout, and they could now give you cocktails for takeout.
Yep.
I get all the business reasons behind all that, but it was a pretty weird time. I mean, either people were on Zoom doing happy hour or doing like recovery meetings. Those are the two main, uses of Zoom, I think, at that time. And, it's funny because workplaces still do like Friday at work. People were like 4:30, and I could hear outside of my office, like, all right, they're gathered in like the kitchen area, and there's a bottle of wine, and like, no big deal. And someone like tips it towards me, which was pretty funny, because I'm like pretty open about this,
yeah, right,
with my like sober dad crew mug that I have in the office. I'm like, whatever, it's fine. I'm just like, no, thank you. It's not a big deal, but it is, it is still a workplace thing. I mean, maybe not in the same way for your work as a content creator, but probably you do have people reaching out like, wanting you to rep their liquor wares.
100%. Yeah. I mean, not so much anymore because I have been a lot more public. You know, I didn't really post on my pages, I think, until it was like 3 year. I hit the 3 year mark was when I was fully out in the open with it. Not for any real reason aside from just like it didn't feel like anyone. I didn't care to like. I'm never the like rah sobriety guy. In all honesty, I deeply wish I was a social drinker. You know, I love well crafted cocktails. I love a really nice, super peaty scotch. I miss that stuff, and not in a way of like getting wasted, just in like the beautifully crafted, delicious, spirit of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the wine industry in New York in the Finger Lakes, which is really known for its Rieslings, and yeah, I get that. That
Totally.
like pairing something, and I love food, so pairing the thing with a really nice meal, I get it. I mean, the world is opening up, I think, more now. I mean, I'm 14 and a half years or something sober. I sometimes even forget. It's been long enough that I'm like, I don't even really think about it anymore.
Right.
And there is great NA stuff out there.
Oh yeah.
Now, I mean, it's like, oh, good. I don't just have to have seltzer with a lime anymore. But it was funny for our anniversary, our first anniversary just a month or so ago. We went to this really nice restaurant, which for our area, $65 entrees. It's like the upper end of what you find around
That's pretty
here.
nice.
We don't do it on the regular.
No, sure.
And I said, it's the place that gives you the enormous tome of wine and spirits. And I said, do you have an NA menu? And the guy kind of got sheepish and was like, well, we have the full line of Pepsi products. And I was like, yeah, and we could mix some fruit juices for you.
Right.
And, so we just got like a bottle of San Pellegrino, which is fine. But I'm like, you're just missing out on a market opportunity.
100%.
Because I would have bought an $8 mocktail. 100% would have done it. And your bartender probably would have done it too. If I was sitting at the bar, I probably could have said, hey, can you like make me something? But some of it is all these new NA spirits like Seedlip that are out there and all the bitter that make these NA bitters that really make these drinks interesting. And I was like, I'm going to spend
beers.
a lot.
I like the beers.
Yeah, I was never really a beer guy, but people speak. There's a lot of them that people like.
Yeah, I just had a Lagunitas IPNA last night that was delicious.
IPNA.
Yeah.
Cleverly named. I like it. I'm in marketing, so I feel that. So it's getting better. I think the wines are not, totally there, but the
sparkling wine's actually pretty good. We had a sparkling. We were in Lake Arrowhead this weekend, and we had a sparkling rosé NA that was pretty good. But yeah, I hear you definitely with the like. There's a red blend from Frey or whatever it is that's just kind of tastes like slightly elevated grape juice.
Yeah. So I don't need that, but it has helped. And I interviewed the guy who owns Empty Bottle in Chicago, which is a music venue, and he was saying in the last year his NA growth was 600%.
Wow, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, I've seen it just on menus, because we don't go out to eat a ton, but when we do, or even in different cities and stuff, like traveling for work, like I was in Dallas not too long ago, and I've started seeing certain menus have in the same way that you would make a pizza gluten-free for an extra $5 or whatever, they'll say make it non-alcoholic for an $8 total or whatever where you can essentially get their whole cocktail menu with one of the, I think it was Ritual or one of the I don't know, Seedlip. I'll have to check that out because I like trying out the different options out there.
Seedlip's more of a botanical
kind
of thing.
Yeah. Have you started getting these like sent to you?
The people from All the Bitters, I interviewed him, and he sent me a little care package, so that
Fun.
was nice. Maybe someday I'll have that level of reach. I don't think my
Sure.
reach is, it's not there yet, but small and mighty. I'm sort of growing. It's all me, like there's no
Consistency.
one else behind this. I do
Mm-hmm.
all the things. I presented at my 12-year-old's her sixth grade class, and I was like, well, I talked about marketing last year, so I'll talk about podcasting this year. And we like recorded like a little mini podcast of the kids.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
one kid was like, "How you must make a lot of money." I'm like, "No, I don't. I make negative money doing
Yeah,
this.
right.
That's how
I
much
know.
money I make is negative money."
Yeah.
But I do it because I love it and I think it's important. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny that perception. I'm like, "Oh, well, you're on Spotify." I'm like, it's not that hard to get on
It's not.
Spotify.
Yeah, I know, right?
It looks cool if you're 12, but it's not that hard to get on Spotify.
Well, I mean, to be fair, being impressive at school day, I forget the term for that day, but
career day.
Career day, yes. Being impressive at career days, there's a lot of cachet there for sure.
It's a little fucking stressful career day because
I
you
can
don't want to
imagine.
hear about it at home. But I like sat on the table, which was, I guess,
Oh, okay.
really controversial to like sit on the table. I was like, God, just that's where my laptop was. So I was next to
right.
my laptop. But yeah, you don't want to like disappoint your kid or embarrass your kid. I mean, I
course not.
totally like embarrassing my kids, but I don't want to embarrass them in front of their whole class.
Yeah, I get that. I'm very excited for when I can finally embarrass my son, for sure.
I did get a little bit of the how old's your dad?
Yeah.
Because like her mom's 10 years younger than me. So I'm a little bit with my stepkids. I'm just on the older end of that. But
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I earned all these gray hairs. So like,
Yeah.
but that
Right.
was a vanity journey for me to kind of be accepting of like, there's a lot of gray at this
I can
point.
imagine. Yeah. Being out on the West Coast, parents are a lot older out here, which is for one reason or another. So I mean,
or at
all
least
my
the
friends,
dads.
Yeah, that's true.
Because men be like younger women.
For sure. That's true. But yeah, like a lot of my buddies from back home already have 3, 4, 5 kids, and I'm just like, that's crazy. But yes, and like 10-year-olds. One of my friends is an 18-year-old. Like it's wild. So I definitely,
and it goes fast.
Yeah, of course.
That's the other thing. I was like, that I have a 21-year-old, like, totally just hurts my head. It's shocking to me because it seems like just yesterday he was an infant. I mean, it just goes fast. Like, years just blink by. I mean, clearly when I look back at the pictures, I look a lot older than I did, but it just totally flies by.
Yeah. I can already understand to a certain, the days are long, but the years are short for sure.
All right. I want to take another pivot because I want to talk about what you do and your, in your content. Cause I'm a clothes guy.
Love it.
And so one thing as a lead into what you do that I really appreciate is that you look at things at like this reasonable price point, right? It's this sort of like everyman. Like I read GQ, I'm like, I'm never going to own that watch.
Right.
I'm just and I like watches. I'm never going to own a $10,000 watch unless somehow someone gives me one.
Right.
So sort of how did you get into your content and, talk a little more about that?
So yeah, I moved to LA to pursue acting and just kind of hated it. It was hard and not fun. But I've always enjoyed being on camera. I went to school for journalism, for broadcasting. So it was something that I was comfortable with and that I learned a lot about being in front of the camera, being behind the camera, editing, all that kind of thing. And I've just always been into fashion from when I was tiny, like 3 years old. I was picking out my outfits every day on my own insistence. So, my wife's was working for a company running their social media and sort of saw me waiting tables, struggling with acting, was like, hey man, you love fashion. Like you know how to write. Let's build you a website. Let's start taking some pictures. You already have a bunch of clothes because I was already super into it. So we did 2015. We just started taking, some high quality photos and posting it on Instagram and my blog that I used to have. Kind of writing little blog posts about why I was essentially what I'm doing in video content now, but more in like a written word form. And being in LA was great because I could go to these different, once I built up at least a decent little audience, I could go email these PR firms around Los Angeles and basically just go borrow brand new clothes. Cause I'm very fortunate to kind of be sample size or at least close. So I would just always be borrowing new clothes. So it looked like I had all the new things that I wasn't paying a dime for. I was just, kind of doing them a favor because I was posting about it. And then I would go return it and pull something else. And it just sort of was a slow grind of years and years of just posting lots and lots and lots of photos, going to every little nook and cranny of my neighborhood, finding different spots to take photographs. And then, built up enough of an audience to start making some money from it. And then in 2020 as well, it was actually ironically kind of perfectly coincided with my sobriety journey. It was right when quarantine happened that my wife was spending a lot of time on TikTok and was like, you should be doing short form video. This app is not just like teens dancing, like everyone says. This is like there's something for everybody on here. So I did. So I started just making these little 15 to 30-second videos of me styling a denim jacket 3 different ways or whatever it was. And that's what really kind of skyrocketed the audience because TikTok was so new that they were really trying to incentivize people to post regularly to build their audience quickly. And I mean, we had, 3, 4, 500,000 people in the first 3 to 6 months because it was because I was at home, couldn't go anywhere, wasn't drinking, wasn't nursing a hangover, wasn't doing anything except waking up every day, making 2 to 3 videos a day, posting. It just was weirdly in this time that, people were going through super dark hardships, ended up kind of being difficult, of course, but for me, kind of like one of the most fruitful times professionally. And then from there, Instagram and YouTube wanted to jump on the popularity of TikTok. So I just started using those same videos on the other platforms. And now we're coming up on almost 4 million in combined audience across the platforms, which is nuts.
Yeah. That must just kind of hurt your head a little bit, those numbers. I mean, it's super cool, but you're like, whoa, what? Wait. But it shows the power, I think, of DIY too.
Yeah.
And like doing something that resonates. I mean, I haven't seen that growth, but if you figure the thing out that connects with people and like you and all these other people who are just really generous and come on and tell their stories, it's cool. And I think as someone who's always liked clothes, I mean, I remember like back as a little kid, really just something about clothes that I always loved.
Mm-hmm.
And it just has always felt like a way to express myself. And then it's been interesting sort of getting older, aging as a guy and how to dress sort of age appropriately, but not feel like you see those guys who like turn 40 and they dress like they're 65 and ready to go play golf, right? Like, I got a lot of tattoos. I am never going to be that fucking guy. I do not want to be that guy, but I also don't want to be the guy that looks like I'm trying to dress like I'm 20.
Yeah.
Because I'll just look stupid.
Sure.
Doing
it's a tightrope. It's a bit of a tightrope
right?
For sure.
And so, and now I work in an architecture firm. So there's a little, it's a creative environment.
Totally.
So there's definitely like a little more like embracing of, there's just more sort of creative people tend to dress creatively. And so there's a little more fluidity with that. The world, and in a way that I'm really happy with, moved away from suits. I actually like a good suit. It's just expensive to have a lot of suits. So I don't, I like ties, I like bow tie, I like all those things, but on the daily to not have to worry about being that fussy. And I kind of bulged out. I had the one gray suit, like the wedding, funeral, job
Totally.
interview suit.
Yep.
Great, the gray suit, but COVID and my waist kind of like I did a job interview with not the top button of those pants buttoned at one point. And I was like, which I actually said in the job interview, it probably helped me I was like, because it was going well and we were laughing. I was like, I just have a confession to make that these pants don't really fit me very well anymore. But, walking that line and sort of finding your expression thing. And I just started to think about, did you watch The Bear?
I'm in the middle of season 2 right now. I'm absolutely loving it.
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, the style in that show, but I don't want Richie has I don't want to give it away because you haven't seen all of it.
Yeah, no spoilers.
No spoilers, but yeah, that's a super stylish show.
For
but
sure.
That notion of and there's sort of the uniform of the chef in that world, and yeah, that show and the music in that show is incredible. That's my fantasy job, is being the guy that's picking the music for The Bear.
Oh yeah,
that'd be cool. So job. Brilliant. I mean, though that show also, you got to be able to manage watching a level of tense anxiety.
Yeah. Well, and like I mentioned before, having worked in restaurants for so many years, it is a really solid depiction, at least what I've seen so far, of what it's like. It's tense. It's the type of thing where you go home and you have nightmares about it. It took me years of being out of it to stop having my server anxiety and nightmares. So yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm really enjoying it a lot. I'm sure can remember, you don't get a ton of time my wife's not watching it. So I have to somehow carve out time on my own in the 90 minutes a day we get to watch TV.
Yeah. It took us a long time. And 4th of July weekend, at the beginning of that weekend, which we did as a 4-dayer, and we had a ton of family in town, I was like, I just want to watch the season 2 finale of The Bear.
Yeah.
And we fucking watched that episode Sunday night at 11 p.m.
Yeah.
We were like, we are watching this.
Yeah, totally.
We might be tired tomorrow, but we are watching this episode.
Totally.
We are doing this.
Yeah. But yeah, to jump back to what your original point was with the budget stuff, that's an important thing for me, for sure. With my content is because I was always the guy, who really liked it, but I was pinching 2 pennies together at the sale rack, trying to put something to have something new, to have something fun to wear. Cause it was always, just kind of using those extra $20 that I had that week to hopefully find a shirt on sale. So I had something to wear that weekend that made me feel good or whatever. So it's definitely always been really important to me because I know that I've been into it forever. So I understand it a little bit better than most people who may not necessarily be into it or haven't been into it for a long time. And it can be very daunting, or it can feel very self-serious. And it's just doesn't need to be like that. I that's kind of a big tenet of mine, is removing this stigma that fashion is so serious. It's a tool, just like anything else. It's a muscle. It's just something that the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the more you can kind of bend it to your will and flexibility and intention. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a moment, and it was, it's sort of more in the workwear realm for me. I was like, oh, I finally found the sort of work style that felt like it reflected who I was. And it was such a nice moment to find that, and there's funny little things. I tend to always button my top button in a button down, and that just no tie. And I just fell into that at a certain point in time. Maybe it's because I was a teenager in the 80s or something, and David Bowie, who was probably one of my first mega, the Great White Duke time, was such a influence on my style, and maybe that love of suits a little bit, though we would probably use a different cut of suit now than he wore. But finding those things that are kind of your flair Or there's once I had a blazer on, and my now 17-year-old, she had a barrette. It's like a plastic flower barrette, and she took it out and she handed it to me. I was like, "Well, what do you do? I do with that?" I just slipped it in the buttonhole
Oh, cool.
on the lapel and clipped it, and I was like, "Oh, like this is kind of cool."
Yeah.
And I was at a vintage store at one point and found this really cool one, so I kept one that I still use
Oh,
and gave
nice.
her one.
That's
And
a good idea.
it was such a random little thing. It was like, oh, this is like a cool use of this buttonhole that you don't really ever use.
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes you do. You can get those little knit flowers or whatever. But like
Yeah.
here's this great hack to have this style
Yeah.
thing because you can find them anywhere, or you can go to some little thrift store and they'll have singles of them and not doubles, and you get them for pennies, really.
Yeah.
Um,
And anytime you can incorporate your kids into your stuff, like for me,
yeah,
I love that. And we went to a work event a few months ago now, and my son gave us each a little, like one of his Hot Wheels to take with us. And, it was just in my pocket. You couldn't see it, but like sitting there in the dinner and reaching in my pocket and feeling the car was just like such a cool moment. So
you didn't
especially
drive
to
it
have
across the
something,
table.
I
I would have
probably
been a
should have.
little tempted to do
Yeah,
that,
right. Totally. Um,
and that's such
but
a
yeah,
cool
just being,
parenting thing too. It's like your
yeah,
kid looking out for you. Like I know
for sure.
you're gonna miss me. They might not be able to like intellectualize that, but a little bit like I know you're gonna miss me. So here's like my car.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
cool.
I know. Yeah, that was really special. I liked that a lot. But being able to incorporate stuff that makes it more personal to you, especially in non-traditional ways, to be able to be creative like that, I think is super cool.
So here's one fashion mystery that I've never understood, and maybe you can answer it to me. Is
Fun.
I do not understand the loafer as a shoe.
Okay.
It's maybe because I'm a boot guy mostly, but the loafer is just a great mystery to me.
Can you like just why anyone would even bother? Is that kind of what you
Yeah, I
mean?
mean, I think because in my teenage years, it was like the traditional penny loafer with the penny thing, and it just seemed so very conservative to me. I
Sure.
think maybe as like the, sort of a grizzled punk dude in the end, like
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's just teenage trauma is maybe why I don't like the loafer, but I don't know that style. Maybe I've just seen the wrong ones.
No, I think that it's definitely a good example of something that has massively come back into style, um, that isn't going to be for everyone, and I think it's a great example of sticking to your guns a little bit, like you don't, if it's not for you, that's great. Even with something that does seem to be super popular, I love them, especially because I'm the type of person who I kind of present in that very, you know, Ralph Lauren polo, tall white guy way. So I can wear them in that classic, waspy style, but I think contrasting your outfit with something like that and kind of making it your own and reclaiming them as something that, might be a little bit more counterculture as opposed to leaning into exactly what they may have intended them originally to exemplify. But at the same time, I think it's really nice to be able to be in a place where you feel confident and comfortable in what you like is huge. That's half the battle, just to be able to say, oh, those are not for me. I'm going to keep my $100. I don't need to spend it on those, or I'm going to get a new pair of whatever it is instead. Uh, it's just because, I don't think that's as weird as it is as someone who does this for a living and makes, all kinds of fashion content. I definitely don't think that every trend is ultimately trends exist so brands can sell new clothes. You know what I mean? Like, so it's, if it's not for you, then stay off board and all the respect for it.
Yeah, and it's sort of as I'm thinking about it, touches on this thing that I've said to my kids before, like don't ever tell me everybody's doing it because shit is not going to fly with me. Right. And it is that just because it's popular, you don't have to do it. I mean, people wore a lot of padded shoulders and suits for a while. It doesn't mean it was a good idea.
Yeah.
Especially as like a small guy, like it's easy to look ridiculous in too much clothes as someone who's only 5'7" when I have my Blundstones on. So, you know, but I get that like sense from your content too, that you are really like, you give examples. You don't say buy this boot. You're like, this is a style like you could look at. And I really appreciate that as a thing. You're like, find the one that you like, but here's sort of a genre to consider.
Because I never want people to just, the term that I like to use is buy the mannequin. You know, I don't subscribe to that. I think because simply by going, and if it's, whether it's digitally or IRL in real life, if you want to go shopping for something, by taking the time to go and expose yourself to what's out there, you're going to learn something. You might learn that you hate it with loafers, you know, and that's great. There's education there. There's value there. But you also might be on the lookout for a brown boot or whatever it is, and realize like, oh, I didn't realize that there's this Blundstone kind of style of boot, but then there's also this lace up kind of style. There's also like something that looks a little bit dressier and something that looks a little bit more outdoorsy. So finding, you know, as opposed to just being like, you need to buy these boots, trying to give people the agency to go and educate themselves a little bit. Because I'm just like, you know, I have a Stay Curious tattoo on my wrist right here. That's just like, that's kind of one of my main mottos. It's just like, every subject of any kind, you know, go learn as much about it as you feel like, because there could be value in learning it. You know, I'm the type of person who just likes to be able to continue conversation with people about whatever the case may be. So even if it's something that I may not necessarily be super interested in, I like to go see what's out there, just so that it may serve me again one day.
Yeah, no, I love the Stay Curious thing. I mean, I'm always looking, you know, for new bands, or I think it's why I like to thrift, because you just the randomness of it. And so I grew up outside of Portland, Maine, and there's a store, Material Objects. And every time I go back. And when I first went to that store, I was probably this 14 or 15-year-old punk kid. And as this woman basically started it in her apartment. The bathtub was like literally full of like random things you could dig through. and almost every time I visit, I go in there and I often buy something. And it's just, you know, part of it's just that journey of like, I kind of came up with this store, you know, in the city, and it's fun to go back there, but she also curates the hell out of the stuff. And it's like, it's just a nice collection. It's not a bunch of junk. It's not always the cheapest, because it's really, you know, it's not like going to Salvation Army or something where you might find something random, but
yeah. But
you know,
I love that.
Something cool.
Mean, thrift is such a long passion of mine. I don't get to do it as often as I would like anymore, just because I don't have the time to go dig. But find a good thrift score is infinitely more pleasing, is infinitely more, you know, satisfying for me than going and buying whatever brand new thing, for sure. I mean, you know, I'm finding that random jacket that is just like so weird or cool, and then it fits, and you're like, oh my God.
I mean, that's the it fits thing. Yeah, is a super fun component of thrifting, where you just, it feels like sometimes the universe directed you to this item.
Totally. Yeah.
And sometimes even the sleeve, you don't even have to tailor it. You're like, how did that even happen?
It's crazy to know that, there's another person with my physical stature who was into the same kind of thing as me. Whenever.
Maybe it's your clone.
Maybe. That'd be cool.
Yeah. I had in Ithaca for a while. I had a doppelganger. He's still around. He's an attorney, and we were in the same office building for a while.
Oh,
And
wow.
there's a certain point in our lives where we looked very similar. And people like look at us like we had changed our clothes midday. And then I bumped into him at a show once, and he's like playing pool, and we're like, "Oh, it's you." And so, in that weird way, we sort of bump into each other from time to time, and
That's fun.
we look less alike now than we did. There's just this certain moment where it was probably a combination of hair and glasses, and builds that did it. And as we aged, it's not that, but it was kind of interesting to have people sort of look at you like, at least he wasn't like a murderer or something.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm kind of convinced there's just like only X number of, I like to think of it as like a Mr. Potato Head. Like there's really only X number of options for all the things. So inevitably there's going to be crossover when we're developing, there's only 500 different types of noses or whatever it is, so that, you're going to find somebody who's at least got a similar combination.
Right.
For sure.
But hopefully not a potato, because
hopefully not a potato, but
I don't want those little spindly legs on the big body. But I guess Mr. Potato Head and Mrs. Potato Head are pretty stylish.
That's true. They do love an accessory, which I can identify with very much. We
had Darth Tater for my oldest, which was the Darth Vader Potato Head. That was pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, in the age when Star Wars started to expand into potatoes, I guess. And now it's just everywhere. But we digress a little bit. Well,
that's good.
This was awesome. I super appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, this was really fun. I appreciate it. It was cool to kind of nerd out on daddom. It's not something I get to do a lot. A lot of my friends are not yet dads, or if the ones that are live thousands of miles away. So it's fun to go deep on it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it touches on the thing, parenting, whether sober or not. Like your community just matters, and the people 1,000%. That are around you just matter. And that's probably one of the hardest times of COVID, right? Is just not seeing your people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm still recovering just in the memory of my need to cultivate my relationships, my need to put in the work. They're not just going to naturally happen and persist. It's a whole separate conversation, but I've definitely struggled with that as an adult, to not just have the built-in friendships that exist in adolescence through school or sports or music or whatever it is.
No, and I totally hear that. I mean, one of my closest friends, it's like we have to actively work, to hang out and get either just the two of us or get our families together, because everybody's just busy. Yeah. And everybody's working and everybody's kids are going in 1,000 directions. And so, it's that intentionality that like really matters sort of in all things, but totally. Especially in relationships.
100%. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Sober Dad Crew is a DIY project by Stephen Kimball, who writes, edits, and produces the show. To support the show, please review it where you listen to podcasts, or visit SoberDadCrew.com to buy some merchandise or make a donation.